So the subject is AI and content moderation for an informed democracy. I'll start introducing the panel. We have Mira Swaminathan, who's from the Broadband India Forum, a think tank that represents a lot of tech companies. We have Pallavi, Bedi, who's a researcher at the Center of Internet and Society. We have Vakasha, Sachdev from Logically AI. We have Ritika, Jain from Boomlight, the fact-checking platform, and we have Denny George from Tattle. Really good to have you all. I think I would just like to start off with a very broad question about, we've had the proliferation of deepfakes now. We've seen politicians being targeted. We've seen Bollywood actors being sort of targeted. We've seen its deployment in a global context and what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. We've seen its implications in what's happening in Israel and Palestine, etc. So that brings us sort of to the next step. Defining the stakeholders who are responsible to now that this thing is between us, what's the next step from here? You of course have your users, the people who sort of produce this content, the people like us who sort of inevitably end up consuming a lot of these content. We of course have the platforms themselves, who become the carriers, the disseminators, the distributors, and in many cases the amplifiers of such content. We have an external sort of hand from governments in many cases, and beyond that there's always an international pressure if something gets a lot of widespread recognition. So these are broadly the stakeholders that get involved in any sort of moderation discussion. Now with the first AI, it has again two sides to it, one in terms of the creation of the content, and on the other side, the way that platforms would want to deploy it to sort of kind of detect that content and potentially flag it to a human person, or maybe skip that step and sort of take that decision themselves. So this generally taking from there on, we're having this conversation in India, surrounded by countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, which has itself gone through a bit of a revelation of late. Things are unfolding in Pakistan as well. We are having a bit of a situation with China as well. And amidst all of this, we have this aspiration of becoming a digital superpower. We're trying to assert ourselves, etc. But the problem, as was raised in the previous session as well, is one of funding, is one of intent also in some cases. So just to open it up to everyone, if we could go around, what are the biggest challenges of sort of moderating content that's been generated by AI, and to moderate that content using AI? What are some of the constraints that we see today? What are the challenges today? What's not being done and should definitely, at least the conversation needs to happen on those fronts.
I think I'd start setting the context as to how content moderation works and what is the purpose of it, right? So, whatever form of speech it may be, whether it's hate speech, misinformation, etc., you have this intent and necessity to take it down immediately, whatever be the time span, whether it's 72 hours, 24 hours, etc. At this point, to look at a very carefully crafted provision, which is 4.4 of the IT rules, right, which essentially states the government asking tech companies, especially SSMIs, to involve deep technology to take down CSAM or rape-related content. But if you see, there are caveats to it, which I think, for all the criticisms of IT rules, is very well crafted. One being having regard to free speech and expression and right to privacy. Second, involving humans in the loop. And third, also reviewing the automated tools itself. I think for some reason, this particular provision 4.4 crafts the entire section of how content moderation specifically works, because this we take as an extreme step, right? When you take CSAM or you take content which are recreated videos, etc. So from there we walk backwards as to what is the nature of content and how much intervention of human is required for that particular piece of information. And I like the context to play out how India is, and we want to reach a $1 trillion economy, and also we're seeing we're at a stage where there's a massive withdrawal of laws, right? Like if you say, for instance, the IT advisory which came in March, which required companies to first take permission for testing of AI models, etc., then got withdrawn, etc. The problem with India then comes through is that, okay, you have IT rules which is also getting challenged. You see a pattern there that there's a set of unpredictability in these laws. So with a carefully crafted provision like 4.4, we also have subordinate legislations which are drafted in a hurry and then are withdrawn and also being pushed back. So this is where we are, where we understand the concept, we have a very good global influence. We also understand how other countries work. But while crafting a law and policy, we either do it in a hurried way and then the law comes out in a way where we have to withdraw it, or we have to take much more time to develop or think over it.
Pallavi.
So to follow up with Mira, I agree with the fact that we do the laws come on in a hurry and they'll withdraw it. But I also just to get back on the use of AI for content moderation is something which I do think it's something to check, because AI as content moderation is can be it's not a panacea for all things. I don't think you need to use AI for everything. So the push by the government is we use AI as a panacea for all evils. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And for content moderation specifically, because somebody is going to make the model AI, right? It's going to be a bias. So that has to be seen, and especially when you're doing content moderation, when AI is being used to do that, you have to ensure that there's no bias. I mean, there will be bias, but how do you reduce the bias? Because there's going to be bias, which is how, where, for example, if that AI is being developed on English, or not, is it going to take into account other languages, even Indian languages? It is different. Indian languages have different dialects, the way you talk about. So, in that sense, something which could be seen as defamation in Hindi may not be defamation in Marathi, maybe different. The context might be different. So, I think what we need to really see is using AI for content moderation. We need to take a step back and see how is that AI being developed, who's developing it. Are we using what was in the global north as replacing in the global south? Will not work, because what may be considered as offensive in English may not be offensive in Hindi, may not be offensive in the context it was used. So that is very important. So I think another thing which the government, a lot of the tech companies also want to push AI. You don't need AI for everything. It will not replace, cannot, in fact, it should replace a human.
Yeah.
Because a human in the loop is necessary.
Yeah.
If the human is replaced and you have tech companies taking over everything, there will be a huge chaos. Because, like I said, if you go to court for something or other, something is like for example, give an example, Malayalam. Different in Malayalam, in Kerala, in Thrissur, something is different. In Trivandrum, it will be something very completely different. You use AI, nobody will understand what's happening. So, I think to use that when you're using AI specifically for content moderation, and then you have the government also come into the picture, is something which will be used to be a little more careful about.
Yeah.
Because this push for AI and this AI application and the for everything is not required.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to take a step back if we need to content moderation specifically.
So you'd rather that more humans are involved in the
Yeah, I don't think when particular AI model is being used, it has to ensure that how we developed it, we need to have checks and balances.
Yeah.
We need, for example, checks as to every level, not every level, at least have auditability of that particular AI model. Who's using it, how is it being used, how is it deployed, more checks and balances, more review of it, and a human in the loop. You cannot take away the human.
Yeah.
Or I understand intermediaries, but there are lots of things coming up. How will they check every particular thing that is required? But okay, but you need some sort of a balance, because what's going to happen? You have pushback from the government. Also, this is what a defamation, and then you go back. You take down within 36 hours, within 72 hours, and go back and forth. And that AI tool will be used again. And I do think, and we've seen it not in India, it's across the world. English also as a language, you have used, and sorry, going back to the fact that language is a huge issue. The context in which that speech is being taken, that is very important.
Yeah.
And especially in a country like India, where something is, like I said, in Trivandrum is something different, in Thrissur is something different. I come from Kerala and I know when I go there, somebody says, defamating Thrissur is not defamating Trivandrum. So I don't understand that.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. So you have a model which is deployed and developed in Delhi or somewhere else and being across the country will not work.
Right.
So I think you need more humans in the picture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Vakasha, with the Indian context, 22 scheduled languages, I guess millions of dialects, something in the same language which is defamatory in one region and not in the other. To add to that, a very heated sort of political environment as well, a passionate country about many subjects. How, and since you work on sort of detecting misinformation, flagging it to various stakeholders, etc., how big of a challenge are we actually staring at when you start even thinking or comprehending that, okay, now Indian content has to be moderated on Facebook, on Instagram, or on an X? Just how big is the challenge? If you could just...
So the challenge is so huge that there are multinational companies that work on trust and safety expertise who've done scoping exercises, looked into whether they can work in India, and they're like, let's just stop. That is how big the challenge really is. And I think, and that is fair. Look, you're dealing with the fact that you've got so many different languages. And then if you look at the way platforms have worked, I think when the Francis Hogan revelations came out, I think what was it, 87% of their resources was spent on English content moderation. 87%. So that tells you how big the problem is, because it's not even just that, okay, you've got other countries with lots of different languages. Is that the resource allocation till now is very, very minimal. And this is, remember, like this thing where you're looking at even European, it's not even as though European countries were being given as much consideration, no matter what. I mean, even that was not being done. So I think partly there is the understanding this problem is something which should have been done a long time ago, but it is happening now a little to a better extent. But I think when you're looking at this from the content moderation perspective, you've got to ask yourself, okay, what are we moderating for? And I think that is a question which I think all of us have all these ideas of why we think moderation is required. And that's fine, but I think we do need to, when we're trying to think about ideas for how this needs to be implemented into regulation, how this needs to be implemented into co-regulation. Because that's, for instance, I think, in the previous session we heard about the failure of self-regulation. And I think that's absolutely a valid point to make. Is the future going to be government regulation? I think we also heard why that's not going to work as well. So co-regulation is the way. So how do you build in systems and processes which are going to help co-regulation for different markets? And I think that's where we have a need to do a lot of analysis of this to be able to come up with the right solutions. Because I think given the severity of the problem and the extent, like the language issue is one of the reasons why using tech is challenging, but it's also one of the reasons why tech is the solution. Because if you try to get, for instance, 22 different languages, get enough human experts for doing every level of review, that's not going to be possible, right? So you've got to use tech at some level to triage, to create that kind of basic, okay, well, this is what we're going to start with, and then we'll move forward. So that's where tech has to be developed, but then that tech has to be developed on a set of things. Where I think first you take that step back and ask yourself, is what we're doing going to help protect freedom of speech? And I think there's some very interesting perspectives on this in recent years, is that the way the internet has evolved, is that now the old adage of, more speech is going to be the solution isn't necessarily going to work. Because actually when you've got the ability to flood social media platforms or flood the internet with problematic content, that effectively censors other people's rights. So there's a very valid basis for content moderation to go forward, but I think there is a need to go back to those first principles when we're trying to decide, okay, how do we then take this forward? So once you assess and said, okay, look, what is the real threat we're trying to address here, which is there. I mean, just takes that moment to step back and say, okay, look, how do we define it? That's when we're able to then frame, okay, so this is the extent to which something will become proportional. This is the extent to which we need to dedicate more resources to those things. And I think it's absolutely correct that we do need sort of more transparency in how AI systems will be deployed and how content moderation processes work. I think if we look at the major platforms today, some of them will give you a lot of information about how they're doing this. But at the same time, where you don't see is where you won't, for instance, know is who are the people who are doing this. And I'm not saying that we want to have a list of, okay, these are all the content moderators on each social media platform, but what you want to have is a bit more transparency in how that's selected, so you can audit that to see is it reaching the right level, right? Because if you're able to know, okay, look, we're taking X steps to make sure that languages 1 to 22 are dealt with. We're taking X steps to make sure that there's a contextual expert. We don't need to know who's the person hired. We need to know how that's being done. And right now, that's a black box. Correct. Right? Even though you know what the policy for content moderation is, you don't know how that's being done, what the process, who's doing it. So that's where I think co-regulation is where we have to start looking at it, to increase those transparency requirements, because that's how you can get away, you can try to address the trust deficit which we've had for years of self-regulation and the failures of the platforms to deal with it. Because it's a greenfield problem. There's no way, it's a sui generis problem. There's no way they could have known this was going to be as bad as it is. That doesn't mean they've not had problems for their time. But like now, instead of trying to be like, oh, so now we're going to just have this stick over their heads, let's try to have a system where we're giving them some amount of responsibility to come forward and tell you about what they're doing, so you can then measure what the levels of accountability. Right. So I think that's just, I mean, I've probably gone on longer than I should have on this, but that's sort of where I think we do need that, and I'm glad we can have this conversation, but then we can try to come up with some of those factors and points.
Ritika, fact checking, of course, is a very important function today. In many ways, your work and my work complements each other. We sort of try and see what's real and what's not, etc. But I was also wondering, given that you fulfill this function where there is this piece of content that's already proliferated and probably reach billions of people, etc., and hence it becomes a responsibility to kind of go out and clarify that realized this was not what it's seeming to be, etc. I'm wondering if you could sort of give us a sense to sort of connect that to the moderation issue in general in terms of the platform being adaptable or responsive towards some of the work that you put out, for instance. In terms of the fact checks that you sort of do and report on, etc. How open are the platforms to kind of take note of work like that? Is there a communication channel, etc.? Are they willing to, sort of rely on your work and maybe implement, like if you're saying something is false, to sort of act on that content on their platforms? Just like, how's that conversation, or if there's one at all?
I'll just clarify, I work for a fact-checking website, but I'm not a fact checker. I'm a legal journalist, that's
Okay.
what you wouldn't know. But having worked with the team, I've been working with them for 4.5 years now, so I do know and can answer quite a bit of your questions.
Sure.
If not, I'll quickly look over there in those two corners, that corner where my colleagues are, they very slyly reply their answers to me. That's what kept my phone ahead. Okay, wink over there. Anyway, no, but I do know what you're talking about. I'll say we only right now. We do work with people. For example, there's this foundation called Rati Foundation, who are safety partners with Meta.
Okay.
And we did reach out to them. We have reached out to them for several stories that we've done, for several instances where we've seen troubling trends that have cropped up and that need to be taken down. If I can take an example, let's just take the RG example, for example. This is the most recent example. What happened was, after the news kind of hit, there was this upward trend in the virality of what that incident was. The victim's name had become a hashtag.
Yeah.
She had become insanely popular.
Yeah.
The hashtag had become insanely popular.
Yeah.
And it was proving to be very problematic because we have laws that protect the privacy of a victim of sexual assault, especially one who's, who's dead, to put it very bluntly. High Court took note of it. The Calcutta High Court took note of it. It directed social media website companies to take down any references to her name. Not happening. It came to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court took note of it and directed the social media websites to take down her name. Not happening. It's been a week now since the news has broken. Not necessarily the incident that happened maybe 9th of August, if I'm not mistaken, and now we're sitting on the 27th of August. By now, she's become a meme, she's become influencer content material, she has become love you Didi, happy birthday Didi. Where that happy birthday and the love you comes from, I have no clue. But her one picture, which also because her name, people started searching for her on social media. People eventually found out it's her, putting two and two together, it's her. I'm giving a lot of context before I come to your answer.
No.
They found out it's her, and then they started posting her images everywhere. There was a movie that apparently was released on Tuesday, the Gone Tuesday, on her. So all of this has been raised, flagged, has been put forth, has been brought to people's attention, including Meta, including YouTube, including Twitter, including all of your significant social media websites. What happened? So I have done at least 2 stories on this. My colleagues have also reported a lot on how this poor girl, even after she's passed away due to this horrific thing that has happened to her, is still fodder for a lot of material, and people are making money out of it.
Yeah.
So we got in touch with, so now take this, now coming to what you said. We got in touch with Rati Foundation, and in my conversation with Siddharth, he told me one thing. He said, so far, everything we have planned has been taken down. So there is a limited success. What we do is we come across a lot of these videos. Yeah. We get them a lot on our tip lines, and it's our work, right? So our social media feeds are filled with this kind of content.
Yeah.
So it kind of comes to us also a little earlier. We get to know the trends and we get to know a lot of this. So the minute we also start seeing, we start highlighting it to certain people. We start reporting them. That's the most basic thing you can do. Report it on these social media websites. Report it on Instagram. Report it on Twitter. Report it on Facebook. And more or less, it kind of does get taken down. How long? That again is a bit of a debate that's happening. So coming back to Haji Court, the girl's name had become a hashtag. So after a week of the Supreme Court order and the mighty giving instructions, Facebook finally took down posts on the doctor's hashtag. Hashtag doctor, whoever. the girl's name is. But what it could not do is, it could not take down the hashtags and the posts where there's a variation in her name.
Right.
So coming back to the first point, when you were talking about using AI to moderate content, let's go back to the basic. AI is a tool, AI is a code, and it's fed by humans. So till we don't do our due diligence and close all the loops, we will not be able to effectively use this tool.
Yes.
It's a tool at the end of the day. It's not sentient. If it's sentient, then we have Skynet problems. Okay. So it's a tool that we have to use, but even the tool has to be properly defined by us.
Right.
If you talk about hate speech, if you talk about vulgarity, if you talk about the different languages having different connotations in different regions, again, it's us who have to feed it in for it to be effective.
Yeah.
Till we don't do that, it's not going to be effective. That's one. Point number two, coming back to RG call also, even till now, if I have to search for her, I might still get it. In fact, I still get it. Hits and searches on her name. The Supreme Court hearing on Monday, again, the victim's parents, they told the court, boss, picture aa raha hai iske upar, what do we do? So they said, what can we do? You flag it, we've given instructions. So now what's the problem? You have a problem. You have a solution also. But why is it still not working? Because the enforceability seems to be a challenge. Now, why is that also a challenge? I spoke to people at Meta, I'm like, guys, what is the challenge? You tell me.
Yeah.
Because I'm writing a story, let's not make it adversarial. I'm not going to point fingers saying, oh, look, tum log nahi kar rahe ho. Tell me your challenge, I'll explain it. Because at this point, we're all on the same side. We all want the same thing.
Yeah.
They said that the volume is so much, what do you do? Again, this is completely off the record. Do not quote them or me. They get in trouble, I'll get in trouble. But the point is that the volume is so much that yes, at this point, the tool would have worked to combat the problem had it been defined well. So that one hashtag did come down. Again, you search and there were no posts. It also says it's been withheld on a legal demand.
Right.
But you do the variations and you're getting the posts. So it's, I think, a multi-fold problem which requires a multi-pronged approach. It needs to be dealt with at all levels by all stakeholders.
Yes.
It's going to be impossible without humans. Only thing that AI, I feel, can do is it can just facilitate it for us and do it at a larger scale. I also feel that moderation should not be used so loosely. We need to be very, very circumspect of it because we're already 159th on 180 in the press freedom index. So moderation can now take, there's a lot of censorship also happening. So we really need to be very circumspect on what we want to moderate, how we want to moderate, and we have to be careful by even suggesting something, lest someone actually takes our advice and starts actually moderating and moderating things that need not fall in this purview.
Right. No, I think that gives a great glimpse into just how complex this problem is. I mean, it's not just a technological problem, but also like so much of the societal issues that sort of
it's also
come
a
up
legal
into,
problem, it's also a copyright problem. Again, it's a copyright problem because when you're using someone's photo, you're using someone's, take Anil Kapoor for example, using his likeness, you're violating his personality. That's a copyright problem, that's an IP problem. So it's a multi-pronged issue. Legal, misinformation, like you thought I'm a fact checker. I am a fact checker. I am a reporter at the basic. So what I do and I get facts and I have to verify the facts. So that's where it is at.
It's just to sort of build from that, and this is a reminder again. I mean, this is still a conversation where we're thinking of a Facebook, of a Twitter, etc. Things get and India is a country where WhatsApp has its maximum number of users. And also for many people, WhatsApp is their prime source of content consumption. And Denny, I would like to get you in on this. When you add into the mix a secure messaging platform like a WhatsApp, like a Signal, etc., and of course, GBs and GBs of content sort of getting shared on that every day, barring the odd good morning message that you get every day. And then to that layer, the security layer around keeping the communications private, etc. How much more of a bigger problem is it going to be there? Because it's not there for public consumption. Reporting by 10 people, mass reporting is probably not going to work in that particular case. Also, a lot of people live within bubbles in WhatsApp groups, WhatsApp communities, etc. How do you assess that situation and just how I don't know, like how conjured up moderation on WhatsApp would be?
I think the encrypted platforms are an extreme exception of this because even the platforms don't have visibility into the content that's circulating there. So I think, especially like on the one-on-one communication channels, like I don't even know what possibly you could do to moderate content there.
Yeah.
But I think the interesting challenge or interesting exception is, let's say, WhatsApp, while it claims to be a one-on-one communication channel, increasingly they've been exploring a lot of public features, right? So they will have to at some point confront this problem of, like, if it's a group chat, to be enforced moderation. For the purpose of scams, I think they started this thing where you can report the scam and then it does hit their server and you can take actions on it and they can remove duplicates of possibly within the group at least. So I think that's the extent of, I think, what we would get in an encrypted channel.
Right. Mira, would you like to?
I think I recently read this one very interesting study by Cornell University where they tried to look at how group admins are the new content moderators. And it's really funny how they try to put like India and Bangladesh. So they try to see 4 levels of parenting. So they've got authoritarian, liberal, do not care, etc. And they said that how Indians, like especially as group admins, they look at this like you want to maintain relationship with a family member by politely telling them that they are wrong. So you just kick them out and then make them join after making them understand. So there were a bunch of like case studies there, but it's a very interesting piece of paper. But I agree with him that there are 2 ways in which content can be moderated on WhatsApp. One is if you report it, and second also with the unencrypted metadata which WhatsApp collects also, right? In terms of account information, etc. So it finds it faulty. And there have been cases like there's even a study that says that around 30 million accounts of WhatsApp has just suspended. So this again requires a culture where there's awareness and literacy amongst group admins and users by themselves. And I think the awareness is spreading. Like when we do get spam extra, we do tend to block, and it's easier to do that as well. And I understand like they have the literacy to be able to do it. A lot of scams are happening on there as well. But yes, it's also what the platforms offer, how easy it is to block, how easy it is to report, and what language it is in. So I think those are the considerations.
Right. Pallavi, just generally thinking from like a political sort of scenario, we've seen there is disproportionate amount of action there would be on certain types of content versus the other. A lot of it sometimes emanates from platforms themselves. A lot of it is also often nudged by the government of the day. How should one see? I mean, is moderation ever going to be like just an ethical issue? Or is it always going to be colored within a political spectrum, a social spectrum?
I do think it's going to be colored within a social political spectrum. I also think content moderation always, you don't have to take it down. It should always be taken down. It should reduce the visibility.
Sure.
For example, I think the Digital Services Act in the EU has said how it defines content moderation. Right? So it also means it's not only just removal, you can remove access, visibility. So you can remove the visibility of the thing. Instead of making number 1, it comes down. So there are different layers of content moderation also. And cyber political atmosphere is also going to determine how you do content moderation. People are going to be willing to accept it. Everything is going to be colored, right? And like I said, any content moderation or whatever is going to be biased. Now, that is where the problem, the trigger is. Because it's never going to be without bias. Whoever's developing is being developed by humans, right? And like I think Ritika said, you're going to develop it through humans, you need human beings to do it. And it's always going to be challenging. This is going to be, somebody will say, because it's in English or Hindi, somebody's developed it. And it's never not going to be without bias. It's never going to be without a bipartisan. So there's going to be some challenges to it. That's why I said you have to keep detecting, keep developing, keep reviewing the particular thing, and keep auditing. Because that's not going to happen. People are going to keep challenging. They say, why is it? We're going to go forward. And just to get back to Ritika said, do you think, you said, you went to Meta and they said they put because the volume is too much.
That's what they said.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But do you think it's, if the same thing happened in the US, would they say the same thing? I said, no, it won't, right? So it is to do with the country that you're in. Market. So I'm saying if the same thing can happen in the US.
Just to add to what she's also saying, I don't know, I think it's Meta only. So Meta, this could be old information, so don't again hold me to it. Meta has X amount of resource for fact checking. Third-party fact checkers, but I believe that 97% of that is for US market, 3% of that is the global market. Whereas the global market is obviously much bigger than the US market.
Absolutely.
So that is one thing. But I also feel that at a certain point, we ourselves have not. I repeat, we have not defined a very simple thing. What is hate speech? We only say it's very subjective. If you are looking at a particular seer who has n number of FIRs against him, he's still loitering out, he's still going around and making more speeches. What has happened? There's nothing, there's no action being taken against him. So what I am saying is that we ourselves don't have the laws, strong enough laws that we ourselves can fall back on. So at some point, why is Meta, again, I'm just being very corporate about it, why is Meta going to go the extra step to do it?
Correct.
He's saying, अगर तुमको नहीं पड़ी तो मैं क्यों करूँ?
Correct. Yeah.
Very bluntly put. You know.
So I mean, certainly money is a factor. I mean, the amount of resources they want to allocate to countries like India, where the world practically lives, etc. Right, like the part of the world where the world lives. Just that means, I mean, that's what Francis Hogan's papers also showed, that the disproportionate amount of funding that's allocated towards the US. Whenever there's a major sort of event that's going to take place in the US, a lot of these platforms do come out with their own advisories or the steps that they've taken to sort of minimize risk and everything. In many of these cases, when the same things are applied to India, whereas a lot of the things here happen on a much bigger scale, you often don't see them to be as forthcoming or being as responsible about a lot of these things. So do you think the platforms do have a West and a global South bias? Is there, I mean, for them, making sure that they are kosher in the West more important? Or rather convenient? I mean, choose an adjective that's in the global South.
I mean, look, I think everything we've seen so far in terms of what we could see ourselves, even anecdotally, if you want to call it, you could call it even in terms of the incidents which have happened, where it is, I think that difference in approach is there, and that is where regulation is to step in. And I think because the thing is, regulation, if you try to make it about the content itself, and then you are going to get stuck in political weeds. You are going to get stuck in these issues, the exact same issues. What is hate speech? When is it? It is going to get tied up in that, which is why what regulation can do without getting into that weeds is about giving them more of these obligations. Okay, look, you will have to do it. You can do it in 10 different ways, but you have to give us a full detailed accounting, and that will need to be audited by a relevant expert to see that you're doing what, at least like if you're saying you're doing XYZ method, are you doing it to a reasonable industry standard? Are you doing it and that's, I think, where regulation can come in, because yes, otherwise you are always going to have that sort of short end of the commercial imperative, which is why they won't do it. So that's where regulation comes in, I think. In terms of what should the regulation then require them to do? I think this is where, and I think Ritika's example is a great example for demonstrating where tech can be useful, but also, I mean, it shows the limitation and also where it can go to fix the problem. The current problem is that we are looking at trying to moderate whether it's a particular hashtag, whether it's a particular set of narratives. You could even try to build them as much as you can that it's not tied to only specific defined words or anything. But you will still run into this problem that if you're running after trying to detect pieces of content related to that very specific person or that specific incident, it does become a challenge, because there'll be variations in how that's spelled, there'll be variations in the way the content will be used, all of those things. And this then leads you into slightly dangerous waters when it comes to moderation as well, right? Now, for instance, in a situation like the RG governments, like we've got a situation where the girl's name is being used. This is a problem regardless, right? And this is a user harm because it's a violation of privacy, it violates specific protections under that. But the way in which that hashtag will have been used by different people, that's what you've got to try to target. Not to say, okay, look, can we get rid of every single mention on this on the platform? Yes, ideally. But if you try to do that, again, people will find ways to get around it. So what you've got to start looking at, and this is a large-scale project, is being able to detect the patterns for user harms. And this is and we've seen this already with Rule 444. It's been applied, and if you look at the Delhi High Court judgment and NCI as well, they specifically talked about the fact that it is possible to do this. But what you'll have to do is develop that sort of ability to detect those patterns through techniques, tactics, and practices, or TTPs as they call it. You'll have to develop that for different kinds of user harms, and you have to develop it to have specific better context in it. Now that's a challenge which is where the whole of the ecosystem has to work together. Now, co-regulation can only get you to the point where these guys are requiring to do some of this. We've got to then work at trying to build these systems. So essentially, a sort of content moderation platform for the future will be able to look at. We'll need to have a set of local models built with language and context, which is where everyone here, people from all the different stakeholders here would have to play a role in developing those models.
Yeah.
Those models need to be interoperable. It shouldn't be something that, okay, Meta's got their in-house model and they use it, Google has its in-house model. Which, sure, let them keep doing that if they want to, but they also need to be working on something which is interoperable. And that's where all of us can then contribute to building that system, which can be built on, there's a disarm framework for disinformation. It's an international open source standard. It has enough leeway where you can use local context, but develop a special framework for India as well. Do that for each of these markets, and that's where we eventually need to go. We need interoperability, we need it to be open source, we need to be developed by the whole of the ecosystem to bring in everyone's expertise. If you build enough of those models, they can be used to detect the stuff regardless of the specific content. And that's how you can try to deal with this problem at scale. At a situation where you've got millions of posts about something, at a situation where you've got so many different kinds of harms to look at. That's the future where we need to go. Right now, the difficulty is everyone does it in their silos. Nobody is working together to work on that, and that's where we need to try and take the conversation. The content moderation systems need to be built using inputs from technologists. It needs to be used with getting inputs from people like Tattle. It needs to take inputs from Logically Facts and Boom on, as the fact checkers. It's
Express.
And that's totally absolutely need to, right? And I think once you're able to start, if you set up a system where those kind of models can be built and are going to be built with that local context, that's the only way you can solve this. And that's why you've got to find that mix. As I said, co-regulation is the way, because if you try to just put a dunda on these people, they will just not really care. I mean, they will be like, they will say, okay, fine, then take us to court, do this. We won't bother with it. It's you know, that it will become too tough an interpretation. But if we get everyone to work on this from a start, then that helps build the auditing system also for them.
Right. So I've just been told that we will wrap in the next 10 minutes or so. So
I think so much to add to what he was
saying. Absolutely. And you would have been so much richer if you heard that. But I guess I'll just open this up for the audience. Take a couple of questions quickly. Please go ahead. If anyone has a question, please. Introduce yourself and please ask a question.
My name is Rahul. I'm an independent consultant at the intersection of tech and geopolitics, specifically to Vakasha. Just out of my ignorance, I'd like you to speak a little bit, even if it's a minute or two, about TTPs under the concept of patterns when you're looking to moderate or take down. When you're looking at the issue of takedown versus visibility, right? So look at patterns. Okay, so starting with what TTPs is.
Yes, techniques, tactics, and procedures is what it stands for. And basically, it is jargon. I understand. It's what you use it in the OSINT, and the tech community will use this to discuss. If you're trying to build a model which is going to be able to say, okay, look, when someone's going to run a disinformation campaign, here are the kind of tactics they will use. Here are some of the processes they will follow in terms of, okay, you'll have a full set of hashtags. And the thing is, some of this is very basic. It's stuff which we already know. Okay, when we know something needs to trend here, there will be certain political parties will get their people out there to start tweeting about something. They'll all tweet the same thing with the same spelling mistakes and all of that. So those kind of things is one of the basics of it. And there is, with the reference specifically, I was looking at the disarm framework, which does this for disinformation internationally. Now they've tried to build, it's a huge set of these TTPs which apply for like a foreign influence campaign, a domestic influence campaign, what they will try to use the methods. You know, we, for instance, Logically's own database of TTPs, which is built out of the disarm framework. We look at, for instance, co-hashtags, co-sequencing. So the idea is you've got to look at these things which will demonstrate, without having to look at the content itself, okay, what are the hashtags themselves? If you've got hashtags around a similar issue all top, like suddenly released at the same point in time, it gives you an indication that there is an attempt to create an influence operation here. Now you can call them good, bad, however you want to look at it. There will be foreign ones, there will be domestic ones. And that's where these, we already have experts who have been working on building these frameworks to decide, okay, look, this is an indication of a foreign interference campaign. This one is of some other kind of influence. And that's the kind of thing which we've got to sort of really build out, because there are people doing this at an international level, and it is open source so that people can keep adding, things in. But we don't, taking this up in India is a huge exercise given the languages, given the size of the country. Which is why it's very important that we start doing this as soon as possible, because we can see it. Like, for instance, now Logically was able to test this. We have a model for detecting foreign and authentic behavior. We were able to test this on something happening in India, because it's not chat room. I'm not going to go into the details. But it's like, there is a particular kind of news which gets spread sometimes here, you'll see in this country, which will follow, okay, this first one person will say it. Then this set of groups will treat it out, this news media piece will be picked up to all of those kind of tactics in terms of how we've all seen these things happen, the model can detect it. It's not as though it's telling us something brand new that, when you look at it, you'll see it's exactly the kind of thing which you could have predicted will happen. But when you can see that the tech is able to do that, that's quite a useful thing, because you can then try to say, okay, look, when you want to analyze this kind of misinformation, let's just say it's communal misinformation, because that's what it is. There is a way in which that gets spread on Indian Twitter and on Facebook. So we can use you can sort of isolate what the TTPs are and then make that decision. Sorry,
do I have scope for a sub question?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Very direct and very revealing, if I may say. Two instances, I'd like to know if logically AI or any other platform in India has the tool layer to detect what you've just said, which is, let's take a classic example. Rahul Gandhi went to Georgetown and said, he looked at a Sikh person and talked about minorities being targeted in India in general. That was a classic, for me, it was a very visible misinformation campaign created by, who across platforms, right?
Yeah.
Immediately. Because I saw the speech and I was like, well, yeah, I know the problem.
Yeah.
And I know that he just pointed out to a person from the minority community on the spot, but it was projected differently. Roll back, his leader of opposition acceptance speech talked about Hindus looking at the ruling party, but it was obviously projected in a very different way, as if he was targeting all Hindus as abusive and violent across the board. And again, there was a massive, machinery in place that went ahead and projected in a certain way.
Yeah.
So, question: do you have a tool or a tech layer already prevalent within Indian jurisdiction?
Well, the thing is to see, we've developed our models externally and internally. Like, it looks at things from both India and abroad. But that's a place where we believe it does need to improve for India specifically. And that's where I'm saying that I think that's where the whole of the ecosystem needs to work together. What our tech would have been able to, for the Rahul Gandhi thing, it would be able to catch the fact that you've got all this coordinated activity to talk. The tech will catch that.
Right.
Now, this is of course where you also have to have human, right? Because on the one hand, there'll be often times when parties will put out coordinated things, or even like our famous environmental toolkit case. People using it in a coordinated way is not necessarily a problem. So that's where the human is to come in.
Yeah.
Because you can use the tech to say, okay, look, here is a campaign which has all these markers and signs of a disinformation campaign. But then you have to have a human sit and be like, is this actually, are they spreading disinformation? Are they actually using it for a valid level of speech? So that is the challenge, of course, going forward. Because the tech can help you say, okay, look, we are seeing all the signs of coordination.
Yeah.
We're seeing all the signs which would often point to a disinformation. Because what you'll see is the way in which something will get coordinated for disinformation campaigns is very similar. It will be a whole set of activate network 1, activate network 2, use XYZ kind of media. Now you don't have to get into the actual content itself to flag this. That's what the tech needs to be able to do. Our tech can do that, but I will say that I do think that if we want to make this more effective, it can't just be that we've developed our tech in silo. It has to be that we are able to then sit down with experts who will be able to evaluate it, see, okay, look, this is there, maybe you should add this TTP, like a fact checker could say, you know what, this is something which often happens with these.
So it should be universally.
It is something which, because see, as I said, right now we based it on an open source framework which is available to everyone. But I think that regional context and things has to be built in as well. So while what we are trying to build is something which applies everywhere, to make it as effective as possible in India, it would definitely, I'd say, the more we can get other people and other experts involved with evaluating it and testing it and contributing to those models is the way forward.
So on these instances, did logically AI specifically flag something and make it visible to a wider audience on any platform?
So the thing is, logically, we've done this on a purely public thing. We did this for the UK riots. We published some reports, some of which were fully made public, some of which was only given to the platforms and to journalistic organizations with some details which were not made public as well. We've done that there. In India, we have done it within the context of certain work which we've worked on. So we've not done it we've not say picked up say a Rahul Gandhi issue and taken it to the cops or to the platforms or anything. But where we've worked with, for instance, election authorities in Assam and now in Jammu and Kashmir, there we've done this, where we've seen these patterns and we've highlighted to them that, okay, this is set of patterns of stuff which looks like it's being used to spread something problematic. You will need to evaluate this and put out a clarification. So that kind of thing has been done. We've not done it in India, as I said, on a sort of general basis. Though in a public interest basis, we did do this in the UK for the UK riots.
I'll just do one last question, then I would like to come to you. Just to wrap things up. we haven't addressed yet about the fact that the LLMs that are getting built, the companies who are leading the efforts are also some of the companies who are running some of the most popular social media platforms, etc. In India, the government is trying to build this LLM called Bhashani, which is like a collection of all Indian languages. There's this national program called Bhasha Dan, where you can sort of ring into the Prime Minister and sort of drop a audio text so that it catches on to that, etc. If you could just speak on just how limited the capacity right now is in terms of these LLMs able to understand the Indian languages, the Indian context, etc., the Indian perspective and everything, and how far off we are right now, and how crucial would that be as we see this proliferation on these platforms?
Yeah, so I think that there is no consensus on even the simple question that what we are seeing, is it general intelligence or just stochastic patterns, right? There is this classic AI tale of a bot in the 60s that was made by MIT, where the bot would just say, how are you? And so let's say you say, I'm having a bad day. The bot would respond with, oh, interesting that you're having a bad day. Tell me more. And then you'll say, I had a breakup. Oh, interesting, you had a breakup. Right? And then people really thought that was intelligence. Right. We have some bias towards anthropomorphizing or like exaggerating what we think the intelligence of the machine is, right? Yeah. So I am not very convinced that, it's quite possible that 20 years down the line, we'll think that all of us were debating that is bicycles a great tool for content moderation, right? Because it just so happens that transformer-based, LLMs seem to generate, do really good on certain tasks where it's easy to think that, oh, this is intelligence versus not just repetition of something, right? And so generally, I feel like, using these models for contested categories, right? Like for example, hate speech or misinformation is like maybe giving them more credit than what they can do, as opposed to like more objective categories that, okay, if I ask an LLM, a multimodal LLM that show me images of a person giving a speech, like that, most of everybody understands, okay, this is a person with a mic, so he's probably giving a speech. Whereas whether that person saying hate speech or not, it's contested. Even what is the content of that, right? Right. And so with that caveat aside, I feel like what we've seen is that let's say an LLM maker claims that this model has multilingual capabilities. The capability varies across different languages, right? And they also vary across different modalities. So we worked on the deep think analysis unit project as well, and this was a surprise to us that like the models were doing really well with visual data, but they were doing surprisingly bad with audio data, and it was actually not very clear. And then we asked the proprietary vendors why it is the case, and they said that it's because of the language, but like that didn't feel like a satisfactory response to us, because you would think that it's just like frequencies, right? So why would the language matter in even like simple tasks as like similarity matching? So there is that's why I feel like even the platforms who are building these models, they have an incentive to overhype what the capabilities are, but we need to be realistic about them. But I think it would be more interesting for the platforms to do more boring work, right? So for example, putting out benchmark data sets on audio stuff or video stuff, like which other researchers, other individual OSINT experts can use and build on, and then we create this like shared common resource that can do stuff, right? But for them to say that, oh, we've scraped all of the internet, and here's a model that you can use, that's an open source model, that's dishonest, and that doesn't lead to like a thriving ecosystem where everybody can participate, because at this point only Meta can participate in this so-called open source model. Correct.
Just to point out, but it's because of these challenges that the LLMs were facing that we didn't see so much of deepfake or so much of AI generated content in the elections right now. It was underwhelming to what we had expected it would be. It was thanks to the
you're putting in a very excited that yes, I'm going to get a story right now. But it's like, this is not a story.
Waiting.
Absolutely. On that note, thank you so much everyone to join us on a Monday evening. I hope this was slightly useful to all of you and we could bear some fruit for your time that you spent here. Again, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you everybody.
You had to handle that.
It's just like, okay.